Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Michael Lenox, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the University of Virginia area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about your latest book, Strategy in the Digital Age. I'm super thrilled to have the chance to sit down with you and chat about this topic. And as we get started, I wanted to share Michael's bio with everybody. Michael Lenox is an award-winning professor, author, speaker, and consultant for over 25 years. He has been helping MBA students and executives navigate the competitive dynamics of markets in the face of innovation and disruption. And like I said, at the University of Virginia, Mike, anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on it?
No, I think, I've long been interested in the kind of interfaces between technology, business and strategy, and also an interest in public policy and the interfaces there as well. So whether it's digitization or decarbonization, really interested in these kind of technological shifts that are occurring in various industries.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, and as we start off, I always like to ask authors, why this book? Why now? There's lots of books out there on strategy. There's lots of books out there on digital transformation. What is it about your book that you feel like is a unique kind of value add in the space?
Yeah, and this actually is based on an elective that I've been teaching our MBAs for going on about 6 years now. And part of it was my own dissatisfaction that lots of interesting writings and the like on the topic, but nothing that really brought it all together in a more holistic framework. And so this was my attempt, really, first for my students, but also from executives and others that I've engaged with, to provide kind of a broad aperture to understand what's happening in the digital age. And the purview is really more than just kind of how a lot of people narrowly interpret digital transformation as, let's go build some data lakes and hire some, maybe AI specialists at this point. But really to the point that my feeling is what we're seeing is a number of industries, maybe virtually every industry, being significantly impacted by digital technology and needing to understand kind of what are those market and competitive implications is kind of the heart of the book.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Digital transformation is impacting every organization. I don't care if you're a mom and pop shop, down the street, or you're a big multinational conglomerate. It's really impacting everyone, and we have to figure out how to leverage not only the technologies and tools, but how to integrate that into our strategy so that we can be competitive in the marketplace. That's what strategy is all about, really. One of the things I'm curious in is just what you've seen, the strategy landscape, how that's been shifting in recent years, especially since COVID. Because you had all of over the last couple of decades, I've seen general trends, and there's been fair amount of consistency in terms of strategic frameworks that people use, et cetera. A lot of that got upended during the pandemic, and it seems like there's been a major shift. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think, the fundamentals of strategy, I think, are still the same. The basic understandings of how valuable competitive positions are created and carved out. We often talk about in our courses the strategist challenge, which very simply is this idea that valuable competitive positions emerge from the intersection of three things: your values and mission as an organization, critically important. The opportunities the market provides, especially what's happening with technology and competition, and then your capabilities as an organization. So the strategist challenge is always to find that sweet spot where these three things come together. I think what the digital age is doing is it's really heightening the idea that the opportunity set might be shifting away from where it's historically been. And that's causing companies to have to really fundamentally rethink what their capabilities are how they evolve those capabilities, and then ultimately what's the kind of new strategic competitive position that's available to them. And in a number of ways, I think what digital technology is doing is it's shifting the locus of the types of competitive advantage that we see.
Mm-hmm.
Where historically, going back 100 years even, economies of scale play, where you build
Yeah.
large infrastructure and dominate an industry from that scale. At the heart of what we see in this day and age is the value of data and the ability to
Mm-hmm.
use data to power analytics, including AI, to provide value-added services. And so, kind of to borrow from some of the slang from Silicon Valley, software is eating hardware for lunch in almost every industry, right? This isn't just limited to what we might narrowly call tech. Tech, in many ways, is invading, almost every industry segment out there, even education,
Yeah.
healthcare, financial services, all are being impacted by this.
Yeah, and since you mentioned it, and since you're a professor, I would be sad if I missed the opportunity to talk to you briefly, at least, about what you see as the impact on higher ed
Yeah.
and the university space.
Yeah, well, look, I think overall, especially with AI, I mean, one of the fascinating things with this book is it was timed just more serendipitously right with the release of ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
And so there has been this incredible heightened interest, especially around the AI. And I've long pointed out, AI is not new, right? We've been working on
Right.
AI for many decades here.
Yeah.
And as we often see, we're hitting that inflection point where the technology seems to be improving at a rate where it's really now captured the public's imagination, and we're seeing increased adoption here. But this isn't entirely new. And again, I even as a undergraduate engineering student, I was learning some of the
Mm-hmm.
AI techniques like neural networks and machine learning. This was back in the early 90s. So this has been a long journey.
Mm-hmm.
So we're at this interesting point in time, and clearly with generative AI, lots of questions about the future of higher ed, lots of questions about the future of work. Are we
Mm-hmm.
going to have
Mm-hmm.
all the jobs replaced? I think what we're going to see, and we've already seen this now for a while, is unfortunately heightened income inequality and more of what people have referred to kind of as the star economy, where those who are at the kind of top, the pinnacles of their chosen profession are going to be 10x more productive potentially than they have. Maybe not quite that much, but you get the
Yeah.
idea. Significantly
Yeah.
more productive by leveraging these tools available to them. It's going to then narrow the demand in some of these fields because you're just not going to need to have as many people doing some of these high ordered intellectual tasks. And that's going to cause, again, this kind of more even massive than we see today income inequality. What does it mean for higher ed? Well, arguably, we are entering, if we haven't been in for a while, the age of kind of the star faculty, where a single faculty member now can have reach far beyond their university. They can do things like podcasts, but they, of course, can do online education and the like. So that footprint is much larger than it used to be. I think it will continue to push universities to, as people said, flip the model, where if you're lecturing, that's probably going away. And you have to think about how you leverage your time in the classroom to be highly impactful, much more discursive, much more, as we call it at Darden, student-centered learning approach, where you're really engaging the students in a conversation, in a dialogue, rather than just kind of a unidirectional lecturing. So I think it will be a dramatic impact on universities. I don't think it's going to be the end of universities, as some have predicted.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And as a professor myself, I'm not at a top 5 business school like you are, but I am, in a university space where I see, these types of conversations happening constantly. And we're a regional teaching university, so our focus always has been, student-centered,
Yeah,
engaged learning, applied practical learning. And so in some ways, I've seen this as a great opportunity to push lagging faculty in the what I see as the right direction of where we should have been already anyways, to do more
that's right.
experiential learning, to that kind of stuff. And so I see it as a wonderful thing, a great opportunity for us to do things that matter to students more than just getting up and regurgitating lectures that we've given 1,000 times or whatever. So anyways, I think that's wonderful. And
Yeah,
you mentioned not just within the university space, but within the world of work generally, right? We're going to see massive shifts and changes in the coming years and decade.
Yeah, think of another industry, any service-based industry like consulting or legal
Hmm.
services. They're often built on a kind of a pyramid model where you have a lot of junior associates, new hires who, dare I say, do a lot of the grunt work. A lot of that grunt work we're finding might be able to be automated using generative AI and the like. And so, people are discussing the idea of maybe it's going to start to look more like a pyramid model where
Mm.
you have the uses of technology to do that kind of entry level work. But you still need those partners. You still need those senior people who are, dealing with the client, working to kind of synthesize what the AI can give them. But again, you'll have far fewer kind of feeding into the system than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and you mentioned you made a really good point about income inequality. This is something that really concerns me, far more than displacement of jobs or like
Right.
the shifting nature of work or higher ed or whatever. Like I'm really worried about that because it has broad societal implications.
Yeah.
We've already seen huge implications of that. From a strategy standpoint, where do you see organizations and leaders' role in this kind of shifting, I mean, big, huge societal kind of concern around income inequality and how that's going to continue to evolve?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to answer from the individual firm's perspective in the following sense. Since the time of the Luddites, we've talked about job displacement for technology, maybe even
Yeah.
earlier than that, this idea that the technology is coming for our jobs. Historically, that hasn't actually proven true. What it does
Yeah.
happen is we have displacements in terms of different types of jobs go away, but we tend to create new ones
Yeah.
in their. The question at hand is what types of new jobs are going to come in the wake of this kind of burgeoning digital divide that we're seeing. And at one level, it could be the case that we do see, it's a different world than we've seen in the past in terms of job creation. There are some economists and others arguing that the end is near in terms of job creation.
Mm.
Others might have a more optimistic view. I'm somewhat in the middle in that I think we'll create various types of jobs, but the question is, again, how vibrant or rich are those jobs? I
Mm.
actually come from a steel mill town in Pennsylvania that unfortunately, by the time I graduated high school, the steel mill was already kind of on the decline. Um, those jobs gave people purpose. Those jobs gave people a sense of identity.
Yeah.
People were very proud of the work they did at the steel mill. Are the jobs that we're going to create kind of in the wake of this disruption going to give people the same sense of purpose or the like? I think that becomes the critical question here. And admittedly, I don't have the answer to what that might be or how that will play out. I do think for individual companies, they're going to have to think they've always had to think very clearly about their talent needs and how to
Hmm.
cultivate and attract talent. I think that's going to get even more intense. One of the things, borrowing from some colleagues at the University of Toronto, they have a great book called Prediction Machines that talks about this notion that what AI does for us at the end of the day is give you more accurate predictions. But at the end of the day, you have a complementary good, which is judgment, which is a
Hmm.
distinct human characteristic. So what happens when you lower the cost of a complementary good like prediction is you actually increase the demand for the complementary good, in this case, judgment. And so this is, again, what leads to the income inequality is that those who are able to kind of layer on that distinctively human judgment capability are going to be really valued in the workplace. And so from a company standpoint, getting that type of talent, that talent who can deal with ambiguity, uncertainty with a fast moving environment. In the book, I talk, borrowing again from others, some of the traits of successful leaders, things like humility in the face of technological shifts. Those are going to be the highly valued and desired workforce of the future for a lot of companies here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, perhaps, like you said, maybe this is a bigger question, a bigger conversation to be had with global governments, and it has huge public policy implications, right? A lot to unpack there, and
This,
certainly
this
something
is
that needs.
why in Silicon Valley, there's probably the biggest push for a universal basic income is this
Right.
belief that there's just
Yeah.
not going to be the quality of jobs created in the wake of this. And so, it's interesting what some of the policy solutions that have been suggested for that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm curious, in our final little bit of time together, maybe we can explore what you see coming down the pipeline in the next couple of years. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard even, I mean, especially when we're talking about generative AI, just the rapid pace, right, of the release of new tools and the evolution of you know, tools like ChatGPT and such. It's been mind blowing to see how
Yeah.
much it's evolved just in the last year. So who knows where we'll be 6 months or a year from now, let alone 5 years from now. But with that said, any kind of general thoughts around prediction or just where you see this taking strategy in the near future?
Well, I like to say I don't know what the future will be. I think
Sure.
if
Yeah.
we continue to see the exponential improvement in these underlying technologies, not only AI itself, but also things like processing power, bandwidth,
Yeah.
storage, which we have seen for a long period of time, the world will be radically different a decade from now than it is today in ways that are hard for us to grasp. Um, I think most humans underappreciate exponential growth. It's very hard for us to actually understand what that implications are. So here are the predictions I do feel confident about. I think in the next, 12 to 24 months or so, maybe 36 months, we're going to see a shakeout occur in AI. We're going to see a lot of companies go belly up. We're going to see the usual journalist reaction that this was all overhyped and this isn't real and it's not a big deal. My point is, we see this every time we have a disruptive technology. I find it funny that people reference the dot-com bust as an example of overhype, and I'm like, but that was still a pretty transformational technology, right? Like the
For sure.
internet
Yeah.
and retail and all of that was very transformational. But what happens almost always is you get massive entry, lots of competition, and a shakeout occurs. And again, this just repeatedly happens with new technology. So I have every reason to believe this will happen in generative AI, and there'll be those writing the article saying that this is not real and it's been overhyped. And all I will say is this is exactly what we would expect to happen as we see this type of technology take off. I do think from both a business, but also even from a policy and societal perspective, one of the most interesting questions that we're going to have to grapple with is, when do we see decreasing returns to data? And what I mean by that is, how
Mm-hmm.
much data do you need to effectively train these AI? If the answer is a whole lot, that's a little scary, because it probably means the economy is going to push to a handful of big winners here in the generative AI space, and maybe be the ones we know, Microsoft, Google,
Yeah.
Amazon, who will be able to leverage scale in a way that no other companies will be able to compete with. In many ways, it would be far better that you could easily train these AI on a smaller data sets. That would allow for a proliferation of different companies to compete in this space. And I don't know if anybody knows the answer. It does seem early indications that, yeah, you need a pretty big data set and a lot of compute to be able to make these generative AIs really, really sing here. So that has some business and even societal implications.
Yeah, but you also mentioned the exponential growth and increase in computing power, in storage space, the cost of storage space going down, computing power going up, cloud computing allowing for scalability, et cetera, et cetera. Like all of this coming together is in part why we've seen this iteration of generative AI really take off. Because, like you said, uh, you know, AI, deep machine learning, these types of things, people have been working on them for a really long time,
Yeah.
but we did have to hit a stage, where we had where the average person could utilize it in a way, that could be helpful. And that's what we've reached. And so we'll see, I guess, how things continue to play out in the near future.
And maybe part of the scary part of this is the fact that the people, really at the front lines of this, I think, have also even been surprised about how well these systems have started to work now in the last,
Yeah.
few years. Like, I think they've been even taken aback at how quickly progress has been made on some of these fundamental problems. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we were bemoaning how hard it was to do pattern recognition in images. And now we have, generative AI that will create not only images, but movies for us, with a simple set of prompts. That, is amazing improvements in the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, this has just been a great conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go here in a few minutes, but before we wrap things up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, well, in terms of the ability to find the book, available on all your favorite channels, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and others, all have it available. In terms of finding me, I'm fairly easy to find online, but I would suggest you go to my personal website, which is www.michaellennox.com or .org, with Lenox is how we spell it. I think final words here, and one of the messages in the book. You never complete your digital transformation. It truly is a journey without end. And I do think because of the power of data and scale, the sooner you begin that journey, the better. I liken it to kind of building an on-ramp to a highway. And once you're on that highway, you're often running down the road. If you're too late to get on that highway, it's going to be very hard to catch up to those companies who already made these investments.
Yeah, well said. Michael, thank you so much. It's been just a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out what Michael can do for you. Check out his book, Strategy in the Digital Age. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.